The car with the license plate Horizon Builders Company 42 was found with mud caked on it at 3 a.m., right after its owner had been summoned. Inside the house, inspectors discovered a trapdoor leading to a basement with thick lime coating and a bucket draining water. 3 bubbling mud pits, along with child pornography publications and torture instruments found in a cabinet. This evidence showed that the incident was not an ordinary missing persons case. What had happened under this house over the years? The dried mud stuck in the wheel wells of the vehicle bearing the plate Horizon Builders Company 42 was noted at 3 a.m., a small but fixed detail in the file, opening a chain of cross-referencing about timing and movement as it appeared right after Mr. Arthur Grant Powell was summoned. From that trace, the reports were reread in the order of discovery and response, starting with confirming Mr. Powell's admission that he had caused the deaths of the missing teenagers, a statement without emotional explanation, simply stating the facts. The subsequent collection focused on the disposal actions he claimed to have carried out, taking 5 bodies to Blue Creek River because the house had run out of burial space, a reason recorded verbatim without expansion. The river was mentioned in the file as a location, nothing more, but it directly explained the vehicle's muddied condition at the stated time, with the match between the confession and physical evidence marked as consistent. Under the dim desk lamp in the closed meeting room, each page of the reports on body recovery was turned over again, clearly noting that only 4 victims were pulled from Blue Creek River, including Mr. Ethan James Bell, found in May 1979, along with Mr. Ryan Patrick Quinn, Mr. Mark Douglas Hayes, and Mr. Paul Thomas Miller, the names kept in the exact order as in the records. A silence in the file appeared where the number 5 in the confession about taking bodies to the river contrasted with the 4 cases recovered, a difference noted but not further interpreted, as training materials required stopping at the facts. The investigative response at the time was to continue collection at the house on Willowbrook Lane, where light, damp smell, and silence were described indirectly through the examination team's reports, without shocking details, only numbers. A total of 29 bodies were recorded at this location, bringing the known victim total to 33, a dry addition but determining the case scope. A noted reflection was that allocating numbers by location helped determine the sequence of actions, but did not by itself explain motive. The cross-referencing steps continued between the admission and physical findings, where the house running out of burial space was seen as a condition leading to taking bodies to the river, a condition accepted because it matched the recorded site conditions. Another gap in the file lay in only some bodies being found at Blue Creek River, left as an incomplete fact rather than a contradiction to resolve within this document's framework. When rereading the report on the Horizon Builders Company 42 vehicle, the 3 a.m. timing was emphasized as a reference point, without assigning meaning beyond matching the developments after summoning, and the mud scene as a sign of travel through wet areas. Another note stated that consistency between confession and traces did not mean all details were clarified, but the file's task was to confirm what had been verified. The verification sequence ended with compiling victim data, the names of those recovered from the river, and Willowbrook Lane as the largest discovery site, everything arranged by recorded chronological order. Throughout the process, investigative reflections were inserted as reminders that files always have limits, that the number 33 was the result of adding discoveries rather than full understanding of events, that the difference between 5 and 4 was a fact to remember, that a confession explaining a trace did not rule out undetected details. When the final page was closed, the document left value in how it forced the reader to follow the order of discovery, response, collection, cross-referencing, and verification, seeing that as a lesson in data discipline rather than a complete story. The prolonged silence in the closed meeting room, interrupted only by the soft rustle of old paper as the file was opened once more, was a fitting starting point for recording this section of materials. The dim desk lamp shone on the familiar lines of text, creating no sharp shadows, just enough to see the sequence of events recorded over the years. Breathing steady and slow, without emotional reaction, as the document's purpose was to preserve facts as stored. Every detail here was considered part of training materials, no more and no less. In that quiet space, rereading became an act of verification, not reminiscence. Mr. Arthur Grant Powell was recorded as born on May 17, 1942, at St. Michael's Medical Center in the state of Northwood. Personal information opening the file and verified by medical records. The synthesis department's response when accessing this part was simply marking the timeline point, without comment, as birth date and place were the basis for all later cross-referencing. Family data collection showed his father was Mr. Robert Harrison Powell, who named his son after a famous actor. The room's light remained unchanged when reaching this, and the old paper smell created a sense of repeated archival handling over years. An investigative reflection was noted that preserving seemingly minor details helped maintain file structure for future generations, even if they did not directly explain events. The sequence continued to childhood events recorded through Mr. Powell's own statements, each age milestone clearly defined to avoid confusion. At age 5, he was abused by a 15-year-old girl in an empty room while accompanying his mother, Mrs. Dorothy Evelyn Reed, to a neighbor's house. The sentence kept in original structure, without added description, only specifying context and ages of involved parties. The investigative response in this document was placing the event in the timeline, not separating it from prior personal information. Collection did not stop at one event. As the file noted, at age 7, Mr. Powell was again abused and assaulted by a man over 30, said to be a friend of his father. Information presented briefly and directly. Reading pace slowed as the two age points were placed side by side, showing repetition in event type, but drawing no conclusion beyond their existence in the file. Another reflective pause appeared that recording ages and relative relationships of involved individuals was necessary for data classification, though the file provided no further identities or social context. When cross-referencing the two events, no timeline or content contradictions were noted, only continuation over years. The desk lamp maintained its old intensity, neither highlighting nor obscuring any line, reflecting the document's neutral approach. The next section clearly stated that Mr. Powell remained silent about the abuse incidents due to fear of being beaten and humiliated by his father, this being the only explanation retained for the lack of reports or official responses in that period. Verification of this fact relied on the confession itself, with no independent cross-reference sources noted within the file scope. An investigative reflection was inserted that silence, when clearly stated with cause, became a recordable fact rather than mere absence of information. The verification sequence continued by reviewing names, dates, and family relationships, ensuring no discrepancies across file sections. The old paper smell and soft page-turning sounds reminded that this was a document used multiple times for training, each reading reinforcing recording discipline. A logical gap was identified where the file did not expand on the duration of silence, but this limit was accepted as part of available facts. Another reflection noted that not adding beyond the file was a principle to maintain, even when readers tended to seek broader connections. When events were reordered by discovery, response, collection, and cross-referencing, no element changed in nature. Final verification was simply repeating what was recorded: birth date, family relations, two childhood event points, and prolonged silence due to fear. A final reflection was added that training file value lay in preserving facts over time, not in explaining them. This recording section ended by emphasizing the importance of sequence and neutrality in investigative storage, seeing that as the foundation for later personnel to understand working with raw data without distorting original content. The final action recorded in this data chain was Mr. Powell establishing the contracting company Horizon Builders Company in 1974, a milestone marked by a neat line in the file and verified by registration documents. The dim desk lamp cast light on the page where the year number was circled, without additional notes, only the familiar silence of the closed meeting room. The slow page-turning pace reflected how this document was used for training, step by step, without skipping sequence. All notes were placed in the context of rechecking timeline consistency. No sounds other than light paper contact. Enough to emphasize this was a synthesis section on education, career, and family, not crime scene developments. From that final point, cross-referencing was done backward along the stored timeline. In 1963, Mr. Powell graduated from Northwest Commerce College, a fact recorded as the start of his formal career phase, with the synthesis department's response being verification by stored diploma, without notes on achievement or evaluation. Subsequent collections showed in 1964, Mr. Powell was promoted from intern to management supervisor at a footwear manufacturing company. Information presented briefly, focusing on title change and timing. The room's light remained steady when reaching this, and the old paper smell made distinguishing years clearer through consistent presentation. An investigative reflection was noted that rapid advancement in short time was a fact to place correctly in timeline, without inferring causes. In September 1964, Mr. Powell married co-worker Mrs. Jennifer Lynn Vance, daughter of the owner of a fried chicken restaurant chain in Maplewood, Iowa. Family details included in the file as part of social context, without accompanying comments. The recording response here was listing relationships in order, ensuring names and places remained exact. After marriage, Mr. Powell was gifted 3 fried chicken restaurants, and the couple had 1 son and 1 daughter. This information stored under family and assets, without specific business activity descriptions. Another reflective pause appeared that recording assets and household members in personal files served later cross-referencing, not economic value assessment. When cross-referencing 1963 and 1964 points, no timeline or event contradictions, only logical continuation in education, career, and marriage sequence. Reading pace slowed as the file moved to 1972, noting Mr. Powell's remarriage to Mrs. Sarah Jane Dalton, a recently divorced woman living with 2 daughters. This detail presented neutrally, without information on divorce circumstances or family life. Investigative response was placing the remarriage in the longer timeline, ensuring year gaps matched prior points. An investigative reflection was inserted that changing family structure was a fact to record accurately, but training files did not expand to impact analysis. Data collection continued with the 1974 point, when Mr. Powell established Horizon Builders Company. This information verified by business registration papers, without activity descriptions. The desk lamp illuminated the company name showing shift from prior activities to a new field, but the document provided no reason or market context. Another reflection noted that verifying establishment timing helped fix timeline order in the file, even without preparation process facts. When cross-referencing the full chain from 1963 to 1974, no year gaps, only depth limits, accepted within allowed facts. The meeting room silence reflected how the document was read, each point as an independent unit linked by time. A final reflection was added that training files required readers to clearly distinguish recorded facts from what cannot be added. This recording section ended by confirming the document's value in preserving discovery, collection, cross-referencing, and verification sequence of recorded life events, used as standard for handling personal files and investigations. When I learned my husband was homosexual, the words in Mrs. Jennifer Lynn Vance's divorce filing stopped mid-line, as if the transcriber paused to turn the page, and that break became the starting point for this file section under the dim desk lamp. The closed meeting room space maintained its familiar quiet, only the rustle of old paper as the file was turned again, slow and steady pace. Rereading was performed as a verification operation, not to recreate emotion, but to place event points correctly in investigative sequence. All notes were examined by the principle of preserving recorded fact nature. This file section was used as training material, focusing on legal system response to recorded acts. Late 1968, Mr. Arthur Grant Powell was arrested after plotting to drug and rape a colleague's son. This information noted briefly in the arrest record, without detailed behavior description, only specifying nature and timing. Initial discovery led to immediate authority response, arrest carried out and recorded as a shift from civilian life to proceedings. In the meeting room, light unchanged when the late 1968 line was cross-referenced with prior points, ensuring time continuity. Subsequent collection shown through related civil documents, where Mrs. Jennifer Lynn Vance filed for divorce and gained full custody and assets after learning her husband was homosexual. Content quoted verbatim on legal outcome, without personal development expansion. The room's silence mirrored how the file handled this event as a parallel legal consequence to the criminal case. An investigative reflection was noted that simultaneous civil and criminal processes needed placement side by side to avoid sequence confusion, but without inferring internal links. When cross-referencing documents, names, timings, and outcomes matched, no fact contradictions. The next file section noted the Willow County jury verdict, sentencing Mr. Powell to 10 years imprisonment. A short line, but clear legal weight. Judicial system response shown through the sentence, without added comments, only number and deciding authority. Desk lamp illuminated the county name and sentence length, emphasizing document formality. Another reflection noted that clearly recording jurisdiction was necessary for later cross-referencing, even if the sentence itself was not analyzed in training files. Sequence continued with execution information, where Mr. Powell was released on parole in 1970 after 18 months served due to good reform, this fact verified by prison management papers. Collection and verification of this point aimed to clarify difference between declared sentence and actual time served, a detail often used to train on reading criminal files. No reform condition descriptions, only administrative outcome recorded. A reflective pause appeared that discrepancy between sentence and served time was a fact to note, but specific causes outside this document's scope. When placing 1968 and 1970 points together, discovery, response, collection, and verification sequence became clear, without needing added explanation. Meeting room silence maintained, only steady page-turning pace reminding this was a document reviewed many times. Another reflection noted that preserving legal document phrasing helped avoid distorting original meaning, especially in training files. No internal contradictions recorded between criminal and civil documents in this section, only parallel processes. A final reflection was added that files did not aim to answer every personal context question, but to preserve verified event chain. The recording ended by emphasizing document value and neutral presentation of key legal points, used as standard for reading and cross-referencing files in investigative work. The silence after the last recorded words in the family account remained unbroken on the page, undisturbed by any sound except the steady hum of the old air conditioner in the closed meeting room. The dim desk lamp shone directly on the lines of text, highlighting the dates but not emphasizing emotion, as the file was not created to record that. The reader's breathing was slow and steady, like how this document had been approached many times before. The file was opened to the section related to one teenager, and rereading began from the short, precise descriptions, without adding a single extra word. The goal of this recording section was to preserve the stored sequence of events. Mr. Ethan James Bell, 15 years old, was recorded as having applied for a job at Riverbend Drugs and Des Plaines to earn money for a camera and a car, a simple motive clearly stated in the file, without additional commentary. The initial discovery of Mr. Bell's life context was seen as background for understanding subsequent points, with the file compiler's response being to mark age, workplace, and job application purpose as independent facts. Information collection stopped at what was reported, without expanding to work performance or social relationships at the pharmacy. The room's light remained unchanged as the next page was turned, and the old paper smell made the timeline stand out more through the presentation. On December 11th, Mr. Bell had an appointment to meet a contractor for introduction to a new job at $5 an hour, double his current pay. This information recorded as a specific event with date and content, without evaluation of economic significance. The file's response was to place this appointment right after the prior job-seeking context, forming a logical chain about seeking labor opportunities. An investigative reflection was noted that clearly recording the wage and comparison to current income helped fix the timing motive, but it did not explain subsequent developments. The collection of family accounts was presented next, where Mr. Bell told his mother to wait a little longer but never returned, the statement quoted verbatim, without added emotional signs or inference. The meeting room silence when reaching this reflected exactly how the file handled this detail as a confirmed final spoken point. A logical gap was identified where that short instruction lacked information on duration or next location, and the file preserved that gap. The sequence continued by confirming that Mr. Bell disappeared right before his mother's birthday, a timing detail for calendar cross-referencing but not further exploited. The desk lamp illuminated this line, highlighting family timeline connection, yet the document did not shift to describing emotional response, staying within fact scope. Another reflection was inserted that determining personal points like birthdays helped fix disappearance timing in the common timeline, though providing no additional event information. When cross-referencing collected facts, no internal contradictions in dates or statements, only abrupt end to the event chain at Mr. Bell not returning. Verification was done by rereading all related lines, from job-seeking purpose, December 11th appointment, instruction to mother, to disappearance timing, ensuring no detail missed. Another investigative reflection noted that the file only reflected what was stated and recorded, the rest outside document scope. The slow page-turning pace continued, but no pages added new facts for this section. The prolonged silence in the meeting room emphasized that the investigative process, at this recording stage, stopped at preserving original information. A final reflection was added that in investigative training, accepting data gaps was necessary to avoid inadvertently filling with speculation. The recording section ended by reiterating this file's value in neutrally presenting a short but clear event chain, used as example for preserving statements and timelines in missing persons cases. The silence in the bathroom ended when the toilet flush stopped, that being the final action recorded in the short but clearly forensically significant event chain. And at that moment Detective David Cruz recognized an unmistakable sign, even though no other physical evidence had yet been seen. The light in the house on Willowbrook Lane was bright enough to read papers, but not enough to dispel the heavy feeling of the long-closed space, where the two supervising officers, Detective Andrew Stone and Detective David Cruz, had been invited in by Mr. Arthur Grant Powell with a valid invitation and no coercion. Prior to that there was no confrontation, no scuffle, just a normal interaction sequence per professional approach protocol, and the file clearly noted Cruz requesting to use the restroom for ordinary reasons, a request not raising suspicion in the soft surveillance context. When the water flushed, a characteristic odor rose with the flow, not everyday living smell, but the cadaver odor described in basic forensic materials, an indirect but valuable sign because it appeared at the exact time and space needing attention. At that moment, no hasty action was recorded, the first response being to remember and maintain status, as procedure required cross-verification before any next step, and thus Detective Stone proactively prolonged the conversation with Mr. Powell in another house area to avoid altering potential scene. This diversion was not to create pressure, but to keep activity rhythm stable, allowing Cruz to complete permitted observation without drawing attention, a technique noted in training manuals when facing unverified forensic signs. The file recorded no other odors beyond that flush moment, nor unusual sounds, only the relative house silence and steady talking voice from Stone's maintained conversation. In the summary report, the odor was described as rising with the water flow, phrasing indicating origin related to drainage system rather than general room air, and this detail cross-referenced with background knowledge on decomposition signs in closed environments. A professional question was raised in the file whether the odor timing fully matched the flush operation, as this match determined source interpretation. In another house area, Stone continued talking with Powell, extending with neutral non-confrontational topics, per requirement to avoid direct conflict without verification, and the file noted no noteworthy Powell reactions during that time. Surveillance was described as continuous, no time gaps, important to ensure no unrecorded house changes. Another reflection in margin notes was olfactory reliability in closed watery environments, as this indirect sign needed tight cross-referencing chain. No seizure, no expanded search recorded at this permitted data point, showing priority to preserve status quo. When Cruz left the bathroom, no description of touching objects, consistent with limiting intervention principle without warrant or additional verification. In internal cross-referencing, odor compared to standard forensic descriptions, but file stopped at noting general characteristic match without conclusion. Another neutral voice question was whether house drainage could produce similar odor normally, left open for later verification steps. Coordination between officers shown in clear role division, one maintaining social interaction, one focusing observation, viewed as correct procedure response when apparent normalcy conflicted with forensic sign. File recorded no personal emotions, only behaviors and sequence, this dryness helping avoid over-fact speculation. Another inserted reflection was odor-air persistence time after flush, as time factor affected origin interpretation. No immediate third-party notification recorded in this data, showing temporary information containment within surveillance team to avoid disruption. In initial verification, only agreement that odor sign needed serious next step consideration, but all actions awaiting valid basis. Final question in reflection. Chain not aiming at perpetrator but file completion, whether conversation diversion sufficed to preserve initial observation state. The entire incident recorded as lesson on noting small details and silent officer coordination when facing insufficient conclusion signs, emphasizing procedural discipline value in investigations. The trapdoor opened under the closet was the final action recorded on December 12th, when the search warrant for Mr. Arthur Grant Powell's residence was fully and properly executed, and that moment marked clear shift from surveillance to systematic evidence collection. The desk lamp in the closed meeting room where I am re-recording this file was similar to the house light that day, enough to see clearly, but not softening the thick feeling of long-sealed space. Before trapdoor discovery, search process followed standard sequence. Each room checked, each item noted, no haste nor intentional omission. Upon entering main living area, many pictures and decorative statues of clown Captain Chuckles were found, repeating in various house positions, and this noting done purely descriptively, without attached interpretation beyond quantity presence and theme consistency. Search team's initial response not recorded emotionally but behaviorally, marking, photographing, listing each per regulation, as in training files all items could have later cross-reference value. As collection continued, child pornography publications, homosexual intercourse content, and torture instruments discovered, each evidence group recorded separately by legal classification, no mixing, no commentary, only confirming private residence existence. Light in rooms where items found unchanged, odor not described unusual, only present silence when each placed in evidence bags, and steady pen scratching sounding like timing measure. A margin reflection noted these evidences appearing together in same living space required cross-purpose storage referencing, but file stopped at noting without conclusion. Next, papers and personal items of many others found, not tied to specific identities in this data, only described as not solely Mr. Powell's, handled by sealing, numbering, entering later verification list. At this stage, discovery sequence created logical contradiction layer, as personal item diversity showed broader involvement than one individual, but file maintained neutral phrasing, no inference. Short pause in search when shifting to closet area, where light more obstructed and air felt damper, though no specific odor description then. Trapdoor to basement discovery part of structural house check, not emotional cue, and upon opening, basement noted full of lime and being drained, a physical state needing preservation for next steps. A professional question in file was what sequence led to basement state with both lime and draining water, as this reflected incomplete process at search time. No deeper basement content detail in this data, only general state noting and closet under position, this spatial factor important for later reconstruction. In preliminary cross-referencing, evidences considered by found position relation, but no final verification at scene, consistent with separating collection and analysis. Another reflection on rereading report was relevance level between Captain Chuckles' pictures and other evidences, but phrasing stopped at catalog side by side, without meaning assignment. When reviewing other people's papers and items list, logical gap noted on identities and origins, preserved to avoid extra file speculation. Lime and draining basement became priority verification point, but even here file only emphasized status preservation and specialist unit transfer per procedure. A final differently structured reflection inserted that multiple evidence types coexisting in sealed space required analysis patience over quick reaction, as hasty conclusions could distort evidence value. Entire sequence from discovery to preliminary verification recorded as continuous emotionless uncommitted actions, serving later investigative training purpose. This file left lesson on full noting importance and speculation distance, as that dry accuracy preserved truth value. The basement silence was first noted, a thick quiet where officer footsteps sounded heavier than normal, and flashlight beams sweeping damp soil surface revealed details dim light could not hide. In that low-sealed space, 3 bubbling mud pits with wriggling maggots clearly seen, needing no interpretation, only position and state noting for next procedure steps. Initial response not voiced but slowed actions, as seen showing biological decomposition signs required adjusted operations to avoid evidence disturbance. Light continued controlled movement, and when a bone segment about 17 centimeters long unearthed, object verification by measurement, description, sealing per sequence, not sentiment. From this single discovery, teams shifted to systematic collection, excavating entire basement at tightly controlled pace, as small deviations could affect later cross-referencing. In process, 6 leg bone sections discovered, each numbered, photographed, placed separate evidence bags, not hastily assembled whole, without sufficient data. A professional reflection in file was bone section quantity exceeding one individual required approach change from single to multiple cases, but phrasing stopped at noting need without conclusion. As more bone sections revealed, confirmation at least 3 bodies buried under house entered report as quantity and position cross-reference result, without detailed state description, as goal first determined scene scope. Excessive bone quantity overwhelmed on-site classification, not deficiency, but real resource limit, leading professional construction team call to dismantle floor for expanded access. Scattered investigative question noted whether floor dismantling could alter initial burial position relations, thus every step filmed and marked. Overhead light after floor removal created clear space change, but not recording change. Still, each discovery entered file sequentially. In search area expansion, Mr. David Allen Rhodes' body found under garage. This identity determination noted as verification point, based on prepared forensic cross-reference and related papers. Another reflection on report rereading was burial position distribution between basement and garage showed need view entire house structure as single scene whole, but file went no further than that observation. Collection continued silently. Only tool sounds and short technical exchanges, reflecting shift from discovery to verification. Logical gap left in file on burial timeline sequence, as on-site data insufficient for order determination, transferred to later analysis stage. When bone quantity and found positions compiled, only contradiction handled was between on-site classification ability and evidence preservation requirement. Preservation priority noted as training principle. Another differently structured reflection noted maggot presence and basement soil state only used confirmed decomposition occurred, not specific timing speculation. When Mr. Rhodes' body removed from garage area, final verification not emotion but completing position, quantity, identity cross-reference chain. File ended this section listing performed steps and needed later stage continuations, emphasizing case value and systematic cautious scene handling, so future generations learn from procedure over results. The final ink note in the file stopped at a name added decades later, and the recording hand then slowly lifted the pen, as if confirming the data chain closed by administrative action. The desk lamp reflected on frayed edge pages where years not aligned, but overlapped per investigative order. No voices in closed meeting room, only steady page turning as items reviewed. Old paper and dry ink smell created neutral feeling, enough remind reader this training material, not emotional narrative. Starting from this endpoint allowed reviewing entire victim list backward, from final verification to initial disappearances. In file body, facts arranged by discovery sequence, starting age statistics showing oldest 21 and youngest 14, small but sufficient range to find very young male youth group. Initial team response not emotional, but scoping common relation, only permitted use connection to Mr. Arthur Grant Powell via Horizon Builders Company. This detail repeated many cross-reference reports. When compiling personal list, Mr. Michael Owen Klein, 19 years old, recorded with disappearance date May 20th, 1977. Clear timeline point for other file cross-referencing. File continued Mr. Thomas Lee Finch, 17 years old, Disappeared late 1976. Broad but sufficient time for common access placement. Next, Mr. David Allen Rhodes, 18 years old. Missing since May 31st, 1975. These point arrangements allowing reverse yearly sequence view. A professional reflection inserted between notes was why timelines distributed within 2 years not longer, but file did not answer. When cross-referencing ages with disappearance timings, team noted life stage similarity, without added observations beyond statistical fact. Meeting room light described stable, unchanged, reflecting maintained reading conditions avoid missing details. Another mid-file reflection structured noted Horizon Builders company relation only confirmed common point. All other connections left blank. When list reviewed again, old missing reports cross-referenced, showing repeated final contact interruption without follow-up information. Data silence after those dates created logical gap, file only noting gap without filling. Next reflection in lighter ink noted long-term no additional information characteristic needing investigative training attention, but no further interpretation. To late verification, file shifted administrative tone clearly noting 2021 Cook County Police identified additional victim Mr. Scott Andrew Nelson, lost family contact since 1976. This addition not changing list structure but expanding, event placed by contact loss year, not identification year. Another non-adjacent reflection noted gap between contact loss and identification timing reflected historical stage investigative tool limits. When compiled, team confirmed all victims young males, ages and stated range, all related via Horizon Builders Company. This final verification in file section. Page turning slowed as pages neatened, showing potential contradiction not in facts, but what facts unspoken. Final short reflection noted investigative training needed focus reading information gaps without hasty speculation. File closed with 2 neutral concluding sentences, emphasizing this document value in consistent recording permitted events and relations, so future generations understand sequence and data discipline as every investigation foundation. The only sound still recorded in the file was the nighttime screams echoing through the house walls, then gradually fading, leaving a prolonged silence that no one in the neighborhood broke. The desk lamp in the meeting room shone down on the page where this detail was underlined, without emotion, only with timing and surrounding environment response. No direct scene description beyond the subsequent silence, and that silence itself seen as a fact. Starting from the sound helped the investigative team place the initial discovery point in indirect neighbor reflections. From there, the event chain was recorded in order for investigative training purposes. When the first response was examined, the file noted that neighbors often heard screams at night, but did not investigate deeply because Mr. Arthur Grant Powell was well-liked, and this detail retained as a social context factor rather than personal judgment. The modus operandi information collection was done by synthesizing statements and reports matching collected evidence, where Mr. Powell's method consistently described as luring young men to his private home. The luring not recorded in speculative language, but by specific actions, including plying with alcohol, drugging, or tricking them into magic tricks for handcuffing. These details repeating in cross-reference documents. A professional reflection noted in margin that using seemingly harmless situations to control victims was a point needing early recognition in investigations, but the file did not expand further. When cross-referencing medical and forensic reports, the team confirmed victims were tortured, assaulted, and forcibly raped, and to keep victims silent, Mr. Powell stuffed socks or underwear in their mouths. This detail recorded as a control method without visual description. Another reflection appeared here, questioning why everyday items became tools in the event chain, but the question left blank as a logical silence. The next sequence in the file noted Mr. Powell strangled victims to death while raping, presented in dry legal language to avoid unnecessary shocking elements. When surrounding environment response brought into cross-referencing, the file returned to neighbors hearing screams detail, and lack of follow-up action recorded as contradiction between sound signs and intervention. An investigative reflection placed here with different structure, that social trust in an individual could delay discovery process, but without accompanying conclusion. In the verification section, modus operandi facts reordered by discovery chain, from luring to home, using alcohol or drugs, handcuffing, mouth control with items, to strangling, to ensure internal file consistency. The meeting room light kept stable as pages reread, and old paper smell reminded the recorder this was training material, not narrative. Another non-adjacent reflection noted that many ignored screams showed community reflection-based investigation limits, without follow-up action. When contradictions reviewed, the team found no differences in modus operandi descriptions across sources, leading to final verification that recorded behavior chain consistent with collected evidence. A final reflection placed near file end, that modus operandi consistency did not mean early detection possibility if signs normalized, and this left as silence for learner reflection. The document conclusion maintained neutral tone, emphasizing file value in accurately recording events and their links, so future generations understand sequence and discipline in investigations as determining factor when facing cases covered by outward familiarity. The final action recorded in this file chain did not occur at the scene but in a closed judicial space, when the first trial for Mr. Arthur Grant Powell opened on May 6, 1980, at Metro Judicial Center. The courtroom door closed, leaving behind a hallway crowded with people whose number recorded as record-breaking in Northwood legislative history. The courtroom light noted as stable, unchanged, and disciplined silence enveloped right before procedures began. The file showed this as end point of a long process, where all prior facts brought for final cross-referencing. No surprise elements recorded in this opening moment, only confirmation that the case had reached public trial stage. Starting from this action allowed readers to understand the entire investigative process completed before court assumed its role. Discovery sequence in trial stage no longer new clue search, but systematizing what collected, and initial public response noted through attendance far exceeding expectations. An investigative reflection noted in margin that this widespread interest reflected prior information accumulation level, but file did not expand on crowd motives. When moving to trial collection section, prepared investigation reports, statements, and evidence presented in order, and jury received them as independent but tightly linked information units. Courtroom space described indirectly through steady paper-turning sounds, controlled footsteps of judicial staff, and prolonged silence each time a document read. Another differently structured reflection appeared here, questioning how large a fact volume needed to eliminate all reasonable doubt, but question left blank as training note. In cross-referencing, jury examined document unity, and file noted no significant contradictions raised in process. This led to formal contradiction step, where parties exercised presentation rights, but did not alter existing fact structure. Another non-adjacent investigative reflection noted that when contradictions absent in data only existing procedurally, investigator role completed earlier. When moving to verification, jury convicted Mr. Powell on 33 murder counts, this number clearly recorded without any file commentary. Death sentence for Mr. Powell described as predetermined, not emotional verdict, but logical trial process outcome based on presented facts. Another reflection inserted at this stage, that verdict predetermination could be understood as direct consequence of investigative completeness, but file went no further than that observation. After trial, recording shifted to execution phase, where Mr. Powell subjected to special solitary confinement at Blackwater Prison for 14 years before execution. This detail noted as administrative timeline point. No descriptions of confinement conditions beyond solitary nature, and file silence at this stage seen as fitting training purpose. A final differently structured reflection placed near in that long period between conviction and execution required file preservation and every fact accuracy, as they must withstand time. The document conclusion maintained neutral tone, emphasizing case value in each investigative step, from collection to verification, clearly recorded for future generations, and this file retained as standard for discipline and sequence in criminal investigations. The silence right before 12:40 a.m. on May 10, 1994, was recorded in the file as a time unit without movement, where the closed space only had stable light and steady breathing of those present. No unusual sounds, no light changes, just maintained silence per administrative procedure. This moment marked the final step of a pre-prepared procedure chain, not an on-site emergent event, but result of decisions completed years earlier. Recording this silence done as verification point, without interpretation. From here, the file shifted to closed status, an entire prior process reviewed in training order. In the 14 years of solitary confinement before this moment, Mr. Arthur Grant Powell continually filed permitted appeals, and parallel to that he drew clown pictures. This detail repeated in periodic reports. Initial discovery in this phase not in new behavior, but repetition, as same activity appeared throughout confinement time. System response shown through processing appeals per procedure, no notes indicating legal status change for the subject. Data collection at this phase supervisory, including paperwork and permitted personal items, were clown drawings listed as non-violating property. An investigative reflection noted that prolonged repetition of a behavior in solitary confinement required classifying it as data or mere background, but file drew no conclusion. When cross-referencing yearly records, no timeline or content contradictions appeared, leading to confirmation that Mr. Powell's status over those 14 years unchanged procedurally. On the afternoon of May 9, 1994, he was permitted final family meeting. This event recorded with specific timing without detailed meeting content description. Afternoon light mentioned indirectly through time classification and no incident reports in process. Involved parties' response shown by schedule adherence and information collection stopped at confirming meeting occurred. Another differently structured reflection placed in file that personally significant but officially recorded events showed boundary between procedure and humanity in investigative documents. Afterward, file shifted to final meal section, specifically listed as a bucket of fried chicken, French fries, a dozen fried shrimp, fresh strawberries, and a can of Diet Coke. This listing without commentary, just standard procedure part, and food smell mentioned indirectly through item nature. No contradictions between this list and related forms, and final confirmation showed meal provided as recorded. Another scattered investigative reflection that detail and seemingly minor items reflected system standardization level, but without evaluation expansion. When reaching execution time, lethal injection procedure carried out exactly at 12:40 a.m. on May 10, 1994, time recorded to the minute. Room light maintained stable, and silence again noted as background condition. No technical malfunction or sequence change reports, and contradiction section non-existent at this phase. Another differently structured reflection noted that when every step perfectly matched plan, document role was certification, not explanation. Final file confirmation was Mr. Powell's death at age 52. This number clearly recorded and cross-referenced with prior personal data without discrepancies. After this moment, no additions, and file closed as complete unit. This case value lay in every phase, from prolonged solitary, appeals procedures, to final moments, consistently recorded for training purposes and investigative data continuity preservation. The Captain Chuckles clown costume, with details recorded in the file as an item serving social activities, appeared repeatedly in reports in ways not initially noticeable. The light in the closed meeting room reflected on frayed pages where the likable cover description used consistently. Old paper smell and silence created suitable context for rereading each recorded line without added interpretation. From this symbolic evidence, investigative sequence reordered for training purposes. No emotional elements recorded in original documents, only fact repetition and their interconnections. Mr. Arthur Grant Powell noted as actively participating in social and charitable activities, this appearing in discovery phase when personal background file compiled. Community initial response, shown through indirect notes, indicated trust and goodwill toward him, this important background for subsequent steps. Information collection focused on clown makeup activities for children's birthdays and hospital pediatric service. These events listed as regular volunteer work. When cross-referencing these records with descriptions of homosexual tendencies and interest in boys in Captain Chuckles' clown attire, file added no commentary, but placed two data areas side by side. An investigative reflection noted that parallelism between public image and personal information created gap needing attention and training, but went no further. In review process, reports showed Mr. Powell used highly likable cover to approach minors. This detail confirmed through repetition in multiple internal documents. Light and sounds of parties described indirectly through mentions as normal social events, where he often joked that people would always be generous to a clown no matter what they did. Surrounding people's response, per file, did not exceed acceptance, and this recorded as context factor, not conclusion. Another reflection appeared here, differently structured, that seemingly harmless statements when placed in long fact chain could carry functional meaning in analysis. Evidence collection not focused on single event but behavior pattern, including makeup frequency, contact environments, and established social relationships. When cross-referencing these patterns, no internal file contradictions, only notable consistency. Silence in reports on negative reactions seen as neutral fact, reflecting social cover concealment level. Another investigative reflection noted that absence of reaction was also information form needing correct reading in professional training. In verification stage, facts on personal tendencies, social activities, and clown image use placed in same analysis frame, without added speculation. File movement pace through desks noted through ink marks and dates, showing multiple reviews without core content change. Another differently structured reflection noted that maintaining fact status quo through many review rounds was key factor ensuring objectivity. Finally, training documents emphasized this case retained not for attention-grabbing details, but for how social factors, cover, and personal behavior recorded in parallel without emotional mixing. The file ended by affirming value of slow reading, careful cross-referencing, and fact respect as foundation for future investigative work. If you found this story meaningful and want to continue hearing cases told with deep analysis, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is the motivation for me to keep bringing you real stories, life lessons, and journeys in search of justice. Thank you for listening to the end, and I'll see you in the next cases.